Welcome, Tova. So glad to have you here with us today.
Hi, Sally.
Hi. All right. So this show, we're taping it ahead of time, but this show is going to be going live on October 28th. And so I am very hopeful that all the students will have submitted their early applications by then, those with November 1 deadlines.
No one will wait till October 31st if they're loyal listeners.
No, exactly. They will be very organized and they will not wait until 11:45 on November 1. Exactly.
Never.
Yeah, we're really hoping that they have everything in, which is what I've told my personal students they have to do. But anyway, so we want to kind of give them advice, give parents and students advice on what they'll do now. Like, what are they going to do? What to do at this point? So what kinds of things do you advise your students? Like, they hit the submit button on the earlies, everything's in, they've double checked, and they kind of just want to go collapse and find out what happens with their early schools, right? So what do you say to them when they want to do that?
Well, if they've done a good job and actually have hit submit on October 28th, 29th, I think they've absolutely earned that weekend to exhale, to go be a kid again and go out and celebrate Halloween and go trick-or-treating and not give admissions another thought for the entire weekend. They get the weekend, if not a whole week off. But then it might be time to start looking ahead to some of their regular decision schools, assuming they haven't applied everywhere they're going to be applying. The biggest mistake I see students making is saying, oh, well, let me wait and see what decisions are. And then if I need to apply anywhere else, I'll apply then. Because surely, Sally, I'll have all the time in the world between when I hear back before regular decision applications are due. That's not the
no,
case.
you won't. You'll have 2 weeks. Basically.
At most, at best.
Yeah, at best. Yeah. So what, and the other thing too, I mean, on the one hand, I'm highly sympathetic to giving students like a week off, but I have multiple students applying to the University of California schools.
Yeah.
And that deadline is November 30th. And they have 4 essays that they have to write. Not one, not 2,
but 4. Personal insight questions.
Exactly. So in some cases, I'm very sorry to tell you this, students, you can't take a break. You have to get going on it. So that is one of the things that I emphasize. And then what about like, let's say we're talking to a student who has applied to like Stanford or Harvard or one of these really highly selective institutions. How do you kind of recommend that they emotionally prepare themselves?
Well, I'd say the weatherman is calling for a 95% chance for rain.
Exactly.
We might hope for sun. We might get excited for sun, but we have to plan for rain when there's a 95% chance for rain. That doesn't mean we're doom and gloom about it, but we pack an umbrella. We maybe wear clothes that won't get ruined in the rain, and you plan for rain. Therefore, if it rains, listen, you might be bummed and you could be disappointed. Sure, we all wanted sun, but you knew there was a very high likelihood that it was going to rain. So sure, you can be disappointed, but you're not going to be shocked, and you can't then be devastated because that was what you were expecting. So, I'd say there are 3 possible outcomes in most of these early rounds that we can expect. And in those highly selective ones, we're planning for the deny. You know, that's what you statistically have to expect to happen. And if you're denied, by the way, that's your decision for the year. There's no reapplying come regular. I always want to clarify that. You could be admitted, which would be very exciting. There's always that possibility. And then we can all jump up and down with you, immediately let that school know, woohoo, I'm accepting, here's my deposit. And then there's also that confusing middle ground, which I don't know if you want to spend a minute or 2 talking about. You could be deferred, where the school is essentially saying, hey, we're not quite ready to make a decision, or at least not a final decision on your application. We want more information. Maybe we want to see more of your senior year grades. Maybe we want to see what the rest of the applicant pool looks like. We're going to defer your decision down to the regular pool. We'll pick your application back up. probably not till end of January, February or so. And then we'll give you a decision with everyone else at the end of the cycle in, end of March or so.
Yeah, absolutely. The couple things I like to emphasize too, if you've applied early decision and you were deferred, your chances of getting in are actually quite low at that point. And I think it's pretty important to emphasize that. It doesn't mean it's zero, but at these highly and I bring that up because, and I'm going to call them out because Harvard doesn't know who's working with me right now. But when I was a high school counselor, I used to get really ticked off at Harvard because they just deferred everybody, like students that I knew were never getting in, right? They were never getting in. These were B students. These were students with low test scores low for Harvard, right? Not low actually, but low for Harvard. And Harvard was deferring them. So these students held out hope. So as much as it's painful for the student, I want to thank Stanford in this moment, because if you apply early and you're not getting in down the road, they are going to deny you. And that is painful. And I mourn that moment with my students, but then they are able to move on. To think about their other students and their other options, what their options might be down the road. And I really that's kind of one of the things that I want to emphasize with your early, try and do that earlier. If you're applying to schools like Harvard and Stanford, you got your application in, you gave it your very best shot. And now emotionally you are moving on because it is Seattle and you need an umbrella. If we're going to take this rain metaphor to the very end, you need to bring that umbrella. Yes, and that umbrella is all those other applications and doing a good job on those.
Yeah. I like that idea of the giving the harsher decision earlier than sort of dragging or stringing the student on. We had a lot of conversations in the committees I was in about ripping the Band-Aid if we knew what that decision was going to be. But I don't want to completely remove all hope. But there were a lot of times we would defer a student because we really just weren't sure. It is saying to the student, hey, listen, you're not our first choice. You need to make the first cut. Right. We can acknowledge that, but we really very well might want to admit you, or we would absolutely cut you loose at this point now.
Right. As long as schools are doing that, I'll say Georgetown, for example, they defer a lot of students. They don't over admit early, but you know what? I've had students actually get in who were deferred.
Absolutely.
And in pretty solid numbers, it wasn't the very occasional thing. It was a real option. So I do want to also say that, yes, there are schools that, as long as you're denying some students, I'm only really trying to call out the students that were really just kind of habitually deferred absolutely everyone, because that's not good for the students. So, but either way, my recommendation is emotionally, you want to move on and you want to start working on those regular decision applications.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's probably also a good time to take stock of your likelihood overall of where you've applied. Do you have a good balance? Are you, hopefully you were, again, a loyal listener and you took our advice and you applied somewhere you're pretty darn confident you're getting in. So you're getting some good news back in late December, early January. But if you take a look at where you hit submit and you realize there's a real possibility none of these are going to be yeses, I think that your next school that you prioritize on your list is one that will be a yes. Hey, maybe even one that offers some sort of rolling decision so that as you get maybe some bad news, you can get some good news along with it. But just double checking to make sure your list is balanced before you get too late into the process is probably a good call for one of your next steps after hitting submit.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Don't just apply then to your reach schools, prioritize those mid-range and those safety schools too. Don't just prioritize the schools with below a 5% admit rate or even below a 15 or 20 or 25% admit rate. Those schools with 50% admit rates are excellent institutions, as are often those schools with 75% admit rates, So well, any last kind of words of wisdom? We have another minute or so.
Anytime you hit submit, usually within 24 hours or so, you're going to get some sort of confirmation of receipt. Here's how you can track your application. That is a wonderful time to take that information and file it. Whatever
Mhm.
organizational system you are using to keep yourself on task and on track, add a column to that chart and say, here's my login info, here's my password, here's how I will track my application so I can follow along and make sure I don't lose that information. It's also always a good time to thank your recommenders. If you haven't already, anyone who helped
Yes.
you get to that submit button, now's a good time to remember to say, hey, did I do this all by myself or did someone help me get here? Maybe
Yeah.
help them. And
Yeah.
thank them.
You know what I always recommend students do actually is once they submit the application, yes, send out an email, but don't say, please send in my letter of recommendation, because that's kind of annoying. As someone who used to get those, I was annoyed. I was like, oh, because I've just been sitting here eating bonbons, like,
Yeah,
but,
sure.
but when a student said, hey, Ms. Ganga, I just want to let you know that I submitted my application. Thanks so
Mhm.
much for all your help. I was like, oh, this now puts this MOOC student at a priority for getting the recommendation in.
Mhm.
So that is so that's a nice way to do it. That is the way that I really
I like
recommend
that.
that everybody do it. So all right, well, we're going to do a closeout. Thank you so much, Tova.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Sally.
Yeah. All right. So thanks so much also to Michael and Alex. Do get ready for our show next week because Ian Fisher will be our host and he will be discussing the Villanova supplemental questions as well as answering listener questions with Shannon Vasconcelos, our regular guest. And finally, I want to remind you that you don't have to listen to our shows live. Every show is accessible 24/7 on the Voice America website, and you can also download every show for free on iTunes. If you want to search for a particular show topic, you can go to our blog page at blog.getintocollege.com. We have some pretty great shows in the archives, including our March 21st show, in which we interviewed Melissa Korn, the author of Unacceptable: Privilege, Deceit, and the Making of the College Admission Scandal. And last, don't forget, we're here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific. So please check us out.